All right, my dear BIBLEin365 family, we are about to embark upon the book of Psalms. Now, technically, you may or may not know this, but there are actually 5 books in the book of Psalms. We'll talk about that in just a second. And I thought that I would kind of share with you some really fun facts about the book of Psalms that might get you excited concerning what you're about to read. Now, the one thing I want to tell you is that this is classified as poetry, and I talk a lot about Hebrew poetry. As a matter of fact, if you go online to my Bible studies that I teach on the book of Psalms, I spend an extensive amount of time talking about how Hebrew poetry works and how the Hebrew language works, and I think you'd really enjoy that. But for purposes of kind of keeping things a bit concise, we have several authors in the book of Psalms. Now, of course, many of you guys know that 73 of these Psalms are ascribed to David. He did write a majority of the Psalms. 12 to Asaph, who was a worship leader. 11 to people who were called the sons of Korah. 2 to Solomon, and of course, 1 to Moses and Ethan. Yes, Moses wrote one of the Psalms, Psalm 90, believe it or not. Now, this is very interesting because 50 of these Psalms were written anonymously, so we don't know who actually wrote them. Now, I told you earlier that there were 5 books in the book of Psalms, and so let's go over that really quickly. In book 1, it's actually Psalms 1 through 41, so it's categorized as one book in the book of Psalms, and of course, book 2 is Psalms 42 through 72. Now, these are interesting because these are called the Psalms of the sons of Korah. That would actually be book 42 through 49. And then Psalms 56 through 60 are called the Mechtham Psalms, which basically it's a musical or literary term. So that's why oftentimes you'll see really good songs written out of these Psalms. Now, Psalms 73 through 89 were Psalms of Asaph, which, of course, that's book 3, which a lot of the worship leading songs that you'll hear come out of this. There is no real grouping for Psalm 90 through 106, which would be book 4, and then book 5 is Psalms 107 through 150. Now, there are some cool sections in book 5, perhaps some of the coolest sections, like, for example, Psalm 113 through 118, they're called the Hallel songs, meaning praise. The songs of degrees are from 120 to 134. Psalms of thanksgiving are 135 through 139. Psalms of protection are 140. My brain's not working all that right. Through 143. And the Hallelujah Psalms are 146 through 150. Now, it's interesting because many of the Psalms in book 5 would have been sang or read while people were making their annual migration into Jerusalem to go visit and to do some more worshiping. And there's some other cool things that you might want to know about the Psalms, like, for example, there are lots of different musical instruments that are spoken of: the harp, the lyre, the flute, the pipe, the horn, the trumpet, the tambourine, the cymbal. And what's kind of interesting when you look at some of the instruments that are listed here are the fact that there are many of the same instruments that we use today, which is pretty cool. And it is amazing when you begin to do a little bit of looking into that. I would totally recommend you research some of the biblical instruments that were used, because you might learn a lot. Like, for example, what they called the harp today is very similar to what we would call the guitar at this very moment. And the harp in biblical times was what we would call a guitar today. So really good stuff there. And then there's a couple of other things you should probably know. Like, for example, there are lots of Psalms that speak about the coming Messiah. So you might want to write this down. Psalm 2, Psalm 8, Psalm 16, Psalm 22, Psalm 45, Psalm 69, Psalm 72, Psalm 89, Psalm 110, Psalm 118, and Psalm 132. And of course, one of the most valuable Psalms that we read is Psalm 139. There's a lot of great ones. 139 really speaks more of the fight that we continue to engage in every day for life. So, one last thing I should probably tell you about biblical Hebrew and the poetry associated with these passages is that poetry is not exactly like the way we see it today as they saw it in the Hebrew language or as seen in the Hebrew language. As a matter of fact, if you will take the time to learn to understand Hebrew poetry, you will be blown away by your examination of the book of Psalms. So a lot of great stuff there. I know it's filled. And if you want to get really more in depth concerning those teachings, I have them available online. The links are going to be available on the BIBLEin365 app and website. It's great stuff. If you want to dig in a little bit deeper, enjoy the book of Psalms. I know I do. I read them oftentimes. And I can also give you one last piece of direction and advice. And that is, if you're looking for comfort and peace, go to the book of Psalms. You'll be blessed. All right? God bless you. Enjoy your reading.